Coming up on The Returned.
Test flight, couldn't make it back to the airfield. I'm going to put it down with emergency landing. Crashed into all these tree trunks in my small open cockpit airplane at 70 miles an hour. Entire airplane just exploded into matchsticks. I broke all my ribs. I ruptured both lungs. I had a hole in my lower back. My right leg looked like a pretzel.
Hi, and welcome to The Returned. Here's to everything we'll discover together. Hi, and welcome to The Returned. Here we share near-death stories, out-of-body experiences, spiritual awakenings, signs from spirit, and the journeys of healers and lightworkers from around the world. Today, I have the honor to be sitting with Jim Bruton, whose near-death experience has become one of the most extraordinary of our time. Jim's experience offers rare insights into what happens when we face death head-on and encounter the truth beyond it. Jim, welcome to The Returned.
MJ, how's it going? It's good to be with you.
It's going so good. Jim, before we explore the ordinary, but it's very far from ordinary, the extraordinary realm you found yourself in, I'd love to know a little bit more about you, about the man before the crash. So who were you before 2016, and what was life like leading up to that flight?
Thank you. I guess you could just say I was a work in progress. When I was a child growing up in the 60s, to just sort of anchor this into a common beginning of a lot of different paths. It was right after President Kennedy said, "We're going to the moon." And of course I'm like, yeah, because, I was a little boy, I loved science fiction. I just, and you go to school and the teachers, to keep you busy, would say, get out your crayons and paper and draw a life living on the moon, so that we would. And then, I also loved, like I said, science fiction. I wanted to invent things because I was ready for that future to be here now. And I thought, well, if I could invent the technologies I see in the science fiction movies, that'll make me feel like that. I also liked to watch a wildlife program called Wild Kingdom that came on every Sunday just before Disney. And these two men would travel all over the world, usually engaged with different conservation projects, helping animals and really kind of digging in. So you would really learn about not only cheetahs and wildebeest and zebra and lions and tigers, but you would also get a sense of what kind of modern pressures of civilization they were having to deal with. When you build a fence across a migration line, what happens? But I knew I would like to travel and make films about animals. And then my dad learned how to fly when I was in like the first grade. And so over the years, throughout the 60s, I became more interested in aviation. But I really loved old aviation, like right after the Wright brothers and right through World War I, just because, brass, copper, fabric, wood, it was like just art, it just looked so cool. And these things could actually fly. And also was interested in God. I was just really curious, like, what's this God? What's all that? And so I'd have conversations with him in my head. Well, in growing up, to go back to the science fiction thing, I became an inventor of various technologies. Basically, I guess you could say I was one inventor in a line of inventors that led to us being able to record video on our cell phones and be citizen journalists at any given moment. I shrunk a TV truck into a backpack and traveled all over the world transmitting video live from places you could not do that before. And so I was pretty active right after 9/11 and a bunch of different war zones. I became a war correspondent for NBC News, but I worked for all the other agencies as well. I also modified it for use in telemedicine, where I became a lecturer at Yale University School of Medicine, integrating recently declassified technologies from DARPA that were destined for the space station. So I went back to Everest 2 years in a row for the climbers to swallow temperature pills that could transmit their temperature and all these other crazy cool biometrics. And also, so that's sort of the technology futuristic side.
Mhm.
And then I also lived in Africa off and on for 14 years making wildlife films, had my own safari company, and made a film uh, or helped make a film for National Geographic Television, for which I won an Emmy.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and then there came a time, though, with all the travel, as great as it was, money was good and people recognize you on the street. That's sometimes nice. I realized I didn't have a home, didn't really have a family, and it'd be nice to have. So I met a widow with 3 babies and said, "Oh, this is a ready-made family. I can see exactly where I could fit in here." So I left the war business and traveling so much, and I sort of took all my skills over into corporate life. And my new wife said, now that you've settled down, you're not going to get bored? Why don't you build these old airplanes you're always talking about? And I said, yeah, that's a good idea. So I did. And I built my World War I airplane first. And then I built a little whimsical plane. Looks like it comes out of a Disney cartoon from the 30s. It's like the birth of ultralight aviation. And so I did get to realize the dream of my old airplanes. I just had to become the person I was always searching for, because the knowledge of how to build these old airplanes faithfully uh, is in very short supply. I did need to these people, and otherwise I just learned the other skills I would need. And so that. I was always spiritually inclined as well. Pretty much more following an Eastern path, because I felt like that's where I could get more answers to my questions than being told, well, just wait till you die and you'll get all the answers, which is what the West tells us. And that wasn't very satisfying. I think I'd already proven myself to be a guy who'll go on the other side of the planet or go to war to get his answers. So I really found, I went where the answers were, and that was more to the east. And that and the airplanes come together. It was in my second test flight with that little whimsical airplane on October 6th, 2016, that I lost my airplane and I couldn't make it back to the airfield. So I had to look around and say, where am I going to put it down? An emergency landing. And I saw this small lake in a nearby Boy Scout camp that was closed for the season. And I aimed for the lake. I said, I'll just put it down in the water. It's an open cockpit, so I'll just pop my seat belt when I land, or whatever, soft crash, and swim out, and it'll be fine. Well, I overshot the bank by like 6 to 10 feet, and I crashed into all these tree trunks in my small open cockpit airplane at probably 70 miles an hour, and the entire airplane just exploded into matchsticks. I broke all my ribs. I ruptured both lungs. I had a hole in my lower back. My right leg looked like a pretzel. And as I sometimes say, other than that, I was fine. Luckily, there was a retired policeman and teacher fishing there, Greg Vitosi, really great guy, and he kept me propped up and called 911 so my non-functioning lungs could gasp, since they really couldn't inflate, until the helicopter came and got me out of there and took me up to Hartford, Connecticut's trauma center. Excellent team took care of me right away. And by the time my wife at the time got there a few hours later, I'd already escaped their first type of restraints they put me in. I guess I was being a handful. And so they recommended that with a week's worth of day-long operations, some only having a 2% chance of success, and that they could lose me at any time, that they put me into a medically induced coma and just be easier to manage. And she said, that sounds good. So they did. Well, who can really say? But just doing the easy math on this, I would say that when they put me into a coma here, that's where my near-death experience started. As to how long, since time moves differently, I couldn't say. But it was a very, for all of us who've had near-death experiences and we start to listen to others' accounts and we read up on them and study them more deeply, it's interesting. To the uninitiated, they might say, well, they all sound so different. But to those who actually have these experiences, even though outwardly they may sound different, we see how they're the same. And it's really a fascinating revelation. So mine just seemed to be almost more of a threshold recalibration experience, because I really got to see how cause and effect works at a fundamental level in terms of creating the universe. So what happened was, as opposed to many near-death experiences where maybe you, first of all, you're hovering out of your body and you look down at the doctor's working on it, and then you go through a tunnel, you're met by deceased loved ones, and then you have the life review, kind of like Scrooge and Christmas Carol, right? And then you might get a big message, right, from an angelic being or something, basically saying, do better. Right? And then you come back. Mine was not like that. Mine was a little more interactive. And I just teleported. Boom. I'm suddenly in this place. And this place, it was like being on a terrace of a tall building in a city that had been destroyed a long time ago, whether it was by a nuclear bomb or an asteroid hits or something like that. It's kind of hard to say, but it was a fully dead city, like imagine New York or Vancouver, 100 or 200 years after the blast. But I wasn't afraid, and there was no sense of dread, like a nightmarish hellscape or something like that. It was just, okay, I'm sitting in a dead city. And above me were these huge, dark and brooding clouds, dark black clouds, like the mother of all storms was getting ready to unload on top of me. And so, in other words, there was just a sense of brooding, if you will. And as I look around, basically, you're in a dead city. What's of interest to look at? Over to my left, also on this terrace, was a large, it was like a sculpture of an egg made out of lattice work, like bands of metal. So there were a lot of open spaces in its wall. You can see right through it. And it was like 4 or 5 stories high and building stories high. So it was big. And of course, it was interesting to look at. So I made my way over to it. And as I got closer, I could see in the air, suspended within, these little gears. But they're a special kind of gear. You know how a gear is like a circle with little feet all the way around it. You see them in clocks or stuff, little machines. But these were a special kind of gear that I learned later, because I'd never seen one before, called a sector gear. Imagine if you took that full circle gear and you took a pie slice section out of it, and you put it in a machine for which a motion has beginning, middle, and end occurs. So it kind of goes back and forth, rather than around. And that's significant, very significant in terms of the internal consistent logic of this whole experience. And as I looked at them, some were very definite and in focus. Some were very ghost-like and transparent. They were just kind of moving slowly, like this was their idol. They're an idol. And they would just pass through each other, no problem, something that would be impossible here. But I was curious. And also, as I looked at each gear, a video feed would play in my head of what they represented. And it's kind of interesting. Oh, okay, and I realized these are moments in my life. And then as I saw a couple of things, these are moments in my life in my future, because I saw my then 17-year-old daughter as one day a mother with two children at an amusement park. And the little girl was taller than the little boy, so I guess she's born first. And guess what? My daughter is now married and is pregnant with her first daughter. So it's all coming according to plan. And then I was curious. I said, I wonder what these gears feel like. So I stuck my hand through the lattice work, and as I'm trying to fish around and find one to see what it feels like, this one just suddenly appeared, brushed by my hand. And as it did, I doubled over in pain. It caused me such gut level pain. But reflexively, I grabbed that gear, pulled it out through the lattice of the egg, and threw it away. I don't know how I knew I could do that, or whatever, but obviously I didn't want it in my egg. And then all the other gears spin around, recalibrating for the loss of one. Because think about it, all these possible choices in your future represent your life and your destiny. And if you remove one, you can't just walk into a boardroom one day and there's a big black hole gaping in space. It has to take place with something. So these were all moving around to accommodate that. And when that happened, literally, it's like I was talking to myself. I said, what is this thing? And that's when this voice came and stayed with me throughout the entire experience. It said, This is the future birthing into the now. This is the process of becoming. I'm sure anybody who's studied Buddhism has considered how the perpetual state of being present is the process of becoming. And I said, well, what's going on here? And, what am I looking at? I said, well, each year is the probability, not the actuality, but the probability, the possible chance of a thought, word, or action in your future. And your destiny is setting itself around what you've removed. And I said, well, how did I know I could do that? Pull that gear out and remove that future moment. And it said, well, why else are you here? I said, I don't know. I said, I don't even know where I am. I said, well, you're in the in-between. I said, well, in between what? And it said, everything, the impossible now between the past and the future. In fact, you're standing inside the eternity of a single moment. Said, for instance, do you remember the world to which your body belongs? And I said, no. And I tried. And seriously, if somebody had come up and said, well, if you stay here any longer, you can't go back, I'd say, well, go back where? And they might say, well, to Earth or your family. And I said, well, what's Earth and what's a family? I was depersonalized down to zero. I had no sense of individuality or personality. I was just aware of being a conscious being. And that sort of figures into the post-game analysis that I'll share in a moment. And so I could not remember the world to which my body belonged. And it said, well, then you see the truth in how the past does. I said, okay, well, why do some of these gears, these features that I touch, make me sick and not others, right? Because not every gear, was causing pain. And it said, well, all choices have unintended consequences, some unfortunate, some not. But the pain each choice brings is your guide. Now think about it. When we hear about a life review, things we've done in the past, a lot of times in an identification with those we've had a relationship with, we'll feel the pain we caused them when we made a particularly bad or unfortunate choice. We say, oh, so it's a way of saying we shouldn't hurt other people because we don't want to feel pain. But the fact is we should just simply not want to hurt other people, whether we feel pain or not.
Absolutely.
Well, this was a chance to experience the same thing, but the potential of the pain it caused. And so it's interesting. In one case, you generally experience it looking into the past. And in my case, I was able to experience it looking into the future. Both are a guide in terms of what's a good idea to do and what's not a good idea. So where are the gears that feel good? I said, you're not here to feel good. It wasn't a threat. It was just, work to do. It's time to clean up. So anyway, and that's when I saw, the gear come into view of my daughter with her two children, future children, at a park, and they were really happy and having a good time. And these are, as life should be. And obviously I let that gear pass by. I didn't remove it. But in any case, as more gears would come into view, I would reach in and basically touch them, let them touch me. And if they caused pain, at least a lot of pain, I would remove them. And then they'd clatter around again and, sort of reset to that. And at some point, so I just did it over and over again. And I realized, hey, it's like I'm cleaning up my future. I'm stacking the deck to have a path in front of me with fewer rocks on it and fewer brambles and fewer obstacles because I'm removing all the crappy decisions I can make as much as, at least as I can. And at one point I looked at this growing pile of gears and I said, damn, it looks like if I don't have a bad future, I have no future at all. Am I going to die sooner from doing all this? Because it looks like whether the bad choices are good choices, there are a whole lot of choices here. It said your destiny has to fit itself around futures that aren't meant to be. Your number of breaths are already counted. I will worry about your last one. And I said, well, I don't know how comforting that is. And it said, eliminating bad choices doesn't mean you won't make wrong ones. Think about it. You can make a mistake and not have sinned because you didn't have a bad intention. And so you won't know they're wrong until after they pass. And since right and wrong are variables over which you have no control, the answers to what comes tomorrow are really kind of a waste. It's better to understand the beauty of how everything fits and refits together. It's like God said, don't have faith in your ability to read the future. Have your faith in my grand design. have faith in me. And you could just hear the echo of how it was almost plaintive, almost heartbreaking that we have faith in God. And I said, okay, so what am I missing here in my lack of understanding? Because obviously I knew this is bigger than I can really understand. I know what I can do, but I don't know that I'm getting the whole picture. They said, what is clearly before you? Grace. No one deserves salvation. It can only be given by grace. It is your birthright, but it has to be chosen at the expense of the world that separates us. Think about that, right? It's always there to be chosen. But we choose so many other things, because we're not done playing with the Ferraris or the whatever else, the sandbox we call the world is for playing. And I said, well, this fixing my future is painful, and I'm kind of ashamed I'm not doing it with some type of moral compass, like a mantra, or imagining like Jesus or Mary or Buddha or whoever, and some religious idol. I said, I only have pain as my guide. Again, that's pretty humbling, right? And it said, well, I said, I don't even know when these futures happen. I said, that's not important either. But removing your enthusiasm to further chain yourself to the world is not as painful as carrying the crushing weight of those chains once they are forged around you, once they're chosen. I said, it's kind of like I'm one of those mouse mazes, where there are very few options about what you can do. I said, it's like this place was made so I could do one thing and one thing only with no chance to screw it up. And that's when it said probably the most profound thing of all. It said, if those with choices make poor use of them, then offering fewer possibilities could be called mercy. You can't change the past, but you can make better choices in the future. Everything is interconnected. And pay more attention to your relationships. And be gentle with everyone as I'm gentle with you. And I remember saying, what's gentle about all this? Thinking about all the pain. You prayed for something for which being here is the answer. And now, the man who fell from the sky is not the same that flew into it. And with that, I took one last look at the dead city, at the dark and brooding sky, and then at the egg and my remaining choices. I put my hand on the egg and I said, I think I can live with this now. And with that, it's like the vision just zoomed out. And that's the last memory I have there. And then I'm not sure if that was like 1 second after I was put under, or the entire week in which I was under, or what. But I really didn't have a cognizant function until after 1 week of coming out of the coma. And of course, this thing is going over and over and over in my head, along with some other significant memories that relate. And I knew something big had happened. And I eventually, because I was terrified of forgetting it, it was so powerful. I said, there's no way I'm taking a chance on forgetting any part of this. So I asked for my laptop computer, and they brought it from home. So I started, writing it down. But what's interesting is I said, when's the last email I remember sending or receiving? And that was 2 days before my crash. Meaning when I crashed, it totally knocked out of me the prior 2 days of living. I had no memory of any of that. And so I find it interesting that, and then when I came out of my coma, like I said, I had no real functioning mind for a week. It was like the most super lucid experience you ever had in your life, with 2 bookends on either side of amnesia. How crazy is that? What decided that part in the middle was going to be your superconscious moment, and it needed to be framed with amnesia on either side? I find that really interesting. And, but like I said, I was in the hospital for 7 weeks, and then before I went home, and I had a really great team of nurses. And I was able to share this whole, wow, guess what just happened to me story with one of my nurses. And she was really cool. She wanted to hear it. And she started crying at one point. And I think it's in this that I started to realize this must be something I came back with. Not reading the future, not talking to dead people, not healing, but like empathy and a sense of super connection. Like that's my superpower, I guess. Everything you can charge.
Those are good.
But as I talked to her, she started crying. I said, "Why are you crying?" She says, "Because I don't want you to die." And I said, "Well, you're a nurse in a hospital. You see death all the time." She said, "Yeah, but you're magical." And I said, "Oh, that perked my ears." I
Oh.
said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, you know how medical personnel are super busy and each patient here might get 15 minutes a day with their doctor, and that's it. They got to keep moving." And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "But I come by your room and you have 3 to 5 doctors in here for an hour and a half, and I walk by, I snoop, I'm listening. Y'all are talking about everything but your medical case, talking about their hobbies, going fishing, their kids. One doctor wants you to be in business with him so badly at night he has you on international conference calls with your leg up in its cage in the air." She said, "I've never seen anything like that." And so I know there's something different going on here. I said, "Okay, that's cool." So anyway, I came home and I'm lounging on the couch, and one day I was just, but I'm researching. I mean, start with out of body experiences. I'd heard of near death experiences. I don't think it really locked in that that's what I'd had though. It was taking a while. Maybe my brain was still coming to coming to grips with everything. I was researching OBEs. And then I thought, well, then I pretty good on Photoshop. I composited a picture of what it looked like where I went that I've shared with you. It was definitely like this post-apocalyptic looking hellscape. And I thought, is it possible I went to purgatory? Now I'm researching purgatory. And it really didn't seem to be a concept that was in existence before about the 11 or 1200s. I said, well, I don't think anything I experienced was recent. I think it was ancient, or it was part of an ancient process. And also I said there was none of the despair you hear of when you're there. And also there were no other souls there that I know of. So no, wasn't purgatory. And then I found IANS, the International Association of Near-Death Studies, online. And, of course, they were all about helping people come to grips with their near-death experience. They have an annual conference every year. They have a lot of informal, like Zoom meetings all the time, every week, almost every day across the country. So it's easy for people to join no matter where you live. And then they also had some resource pages that I found really interesting. And I guess I was thinking, this was almost 6 months after I had my crash. They talked about finding like counseling resources. You can imagine that if you had something like this, you might not be able to go to your preacher or your minister, your rabbi or your mullah or your guru about it. I mean, it just depends. Over in the East, they might have a much more pre-inclined way of dealing with this, but in the West, it could be the work of the devil, or they just, they have all kinds of issues, and we all know about that, those who are spiritual pilgrims. And so I just kind of kept pushing on and found that as far as counseling resources, hey, there was one in Connecticut. And I said, oh, this is cool. So I thought, at least just go talk to somebody who has some experiences. My family, though kindly intending, they just could, how do you relate? How do you relate to that if you hadn't had that experience? So I said, I just need to find somebody like that. So I went as much for that as for, I didn't know if I really needed counseling, but just to kind of share my story and see what they thought of it. So I did. And that was good and interesting. But I also learned on that same page, it said, the challenges of kind of adjusting back to life here. The main one it spoke of, and I was relating to it and came to relate to it in full. And that was, it said, we have the world of normal people has a divorce rate of 53%, like at least in the States. That's pretty bad because that means every other house in your neighborhood's falling apart. For people who have near-death experiences, it's 78%. That's a 50% increase. And that means only 22% of them are holding it together. And I said, oh, hell. Well, like I said, I did eventually over time become a divorce statistic. However, we remain friends. She's come to visit me at Christmas, and that's good. I mean, it's not like we started hating each other. It's just she was on where'd my husband go? And it wasn't. As I said, the NDE introduces an ambiguity into the relationship, and there's no relationship that welcomes an ambiguity. We're always looking for more connectedness and more certainty. So I can't really blame her. She just really wasn't ready to, I guess, walk a more spiritual path with me as I found myself walking a more spiritual path. Even though, again, like I said, I was always spiritually inclined. So I did find a local IANDS chapter in Connecticut, and I went for the first 3 months. I just didn't say a word. I'm just watching, and because you don't know if people are going to come in there all full of themselves or bragging. Like when here's one of the favorite. You go to a meeting or a conference. How many times might you hear somebody say, "Well, I had a near-death experience," and someone always pipes up and says, "Well, I had 3 near-death experiences," and somebody might even say, "Well, I had 5," and then I realize, if it required dying to get the picture, it means you have a really thick head. Maybe you shouldn't be bragging about how many times you had to get hit with the stick to get the message. Word to the wise and a 2x4 for the wicked, right? So,
Yeah.
Even within a group of people who are focused on spiritual transforming experiences, you still find ego. You still find people who are, and sometimes people with false stories who are trying
Right.
in that regard, whether they've had an experience or not, or they write a book because they want to make money or be famous or whatever and charge money for workshops or hourly sessions. And I'm not saying they all do, and I'm not saying that's all bad. I mean, sometimes you have to charge money just as a filter, or you'll never get anything done because people are knocking on your door or calling you all the time.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? I mean, to be totally fair. But I do think that sometimes it just seems like there are a bunch of carnival sideshows out there, and it's kind of hard to sort out the real people from the falsehoods. And that's kind of important to me. So I've been focusing. I've written a couple of books. Now I'm working on a third book. The first book was your classic before, middle, and after, the NDE, and with a lot of stuff already shared. The second book was more like how to put some of this into practice. It was called, the first book's called The In-Between, A Trip of a Lifetime. I should have called it Back by Popular Demand. The second book is The Practice in Between, The Art of Letting Go. Because when I was in the hospital and conversing with God, there were some, I wouldn't call them bad habits, but there were just some things, and he materialized them in front of me and said, "What do you want to do with these? Do you want to take them with you? Keep them in your life, or do you want to let them go?" He said, "If you want to keep them, I will carry them forward," which is a beautiful, non-judgmental way of saying, "I'm with you 100% all the way."
Yeah.
He said, "But if you want to let them go, I'll remove all attachment to them. It'll be as if you never did these things, and then they have no hold on." I said, "Let them go." And they immediately disappeared. And a lot of these things I still, as far as just being a human being, not like bad person, habits that might not be the best for you, I've let go. And so that was an interesting power. And then it said to me, all the force of will you'll ever need, it's found in the art of letting go. Always live life in celebration, the individual spirit, for no one and no thing can stand before the brilliance of a truly naked soul. Oh, that's the way God talks.
Wow.
It's like, okay.
Wow.
Yeah. And so what it was saying, think about the understatement there. It's about living authentically. That's sort of a buzzword these days. Oh, live authentically. But, when people say, how do I put into practice the stuff you're saying? Say, well, what you're asking is, how do you live a more spiritual life? You cannot live a spiritual life of any sort unless you start living an authentic life. It just, you can't shortcut around that. You cannot live a false life and be a spiritual person. You'll just be a spiritual agony. And like, has been said before, religion is the other thinker. Spirituality is it's the finger points. It is such a beautiful, gentle answer of saying you can target as many archers and many. So we just have to discover ourselves, like Socrates, man, know thyself, or whatever. Rather than say, where's my perfect partner in life? Ask, how do I need to be loved? How do I really need to be loved? Warts and all. And then once you understand that, once you accept that, people start popping into focus in front of you. And now you're starting to learn that through the process of self-discovery and self-awareness, and that's your logical capacity, that's your emotional awareness, you start to be aware of who you are and where you resonate. And that resonance is everything. You've met people who at a moment it seemed like, gosh, it seems like I've known you all my life. right? And you met other people. It's like, how fast can I get the hell out of this room? I get well dressed and well groomed. It's like, I don't want to be here. So we have to learn to really listen to that. And the only way you understand that your restless is true is because you're kind of living a life of truth, authenticity.
Right.
And it's, of
Right.
course, each day it's another step and further unfolding. And that's what my third book is really a lot about, is about resonance. So I'm looking forward to releasing that soon. In the meantime, I moved out to a different place from Connecticut, and there's a little film festival here, and I went earlier this year. And as I'm watching, I could tell my story about my MDE, and I really just thought about doing that. But I paired up with a friend of mine who's a one-person production powerhouse near Washington, D.C., and he said, "Oh, let's do a few tweaks here. We'll make a few tweaks to the story." So it really became more in line with my pursuit of looking at what comes next with an NDE in terms of this integration. So it's called the in-between threshold, because it is a threshold experience. We interviewed PMH Atwater, Dr. Mary Helen Hensley, and those were the two people who said, you need to go write a book. And I said, okay, so that's where my first book came from. And then the Gentile family in North Carolina, who have a daughter, Maria, who has First syndrome, and they live the correct integration of a spiritually transformative experience into daily life. They are true to each other, deeply in love, and they are so incredibly loving of Maria. And Maria is really cool. She can't control her body, so she's kind of nonverbal, but she has those electronic pads she can speak through. And you can sense through resonance, you can sense her personality. And she's smart, she's loving, she's very spiritual, and I just loved being in her space. It was really cool. But what's beautiful is the question asked of this family of, after an NDE, how did you hold it together, was answered in the love they have for the product of their love, which is their daughter. And so she becomes the nonverbal answer to a verbalized question. And so that's a great way to wrap up.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So that's out there. It's on YouTube. And it'll be in the little.
May I be able to put that into the description box?
Yeah, I'll send you the link to my website.
Okay.
And my movie, and anything else that seems pertinent, as well as a picture of the in-between. So
that would be really cool. Thank you. Thank you for that. Actually, I wanted to start off with the voice that you heard. Who is that voice to you?
People have asked that question. It's an excellent question, right? All I can say is it was calm and it was sage, and being it was in my head, I couldn't tell you if it was male or female, right? But, and people have really asked with a sincerity that has made me wonder, how there are certain perspectives that might say, we're already one with God.
Yeah.
But there's a part of us that is here doing this. And there's part maybe in the multiverse of creation, we're all simultaneously living out our reincarnation, our incarnations. It's not a reincarnation, it's a simultaneous incarnation across millions of universes. Who knows? We might really find out that's what it is to be a child of God. You can really do that kind of stuff. So maybe it was my voice, is what I'm saying, from a more evolved perspective, right? I mean, we've all, think about it, anytime we've considered, should I do this or should I do that? How many times does it seem like a wiser voice within our head speaks, or of the more grown-up version of ourselves speaks, or something like that? So if we're already one with God, then it was me, but from coming from a higher place. But because it helps us to sometimes understand things by projecting them out of us as a model that we can literally walk around and look from all the different angles, or see the light refract through that faceted gem at all different angles. Each refraction has information about the thing through which it passes. I would tend to say, it's more like the voice of God. But again, I mean, it's what do I suffer if I'm wrong in either case? But that's the best I can answer.
Oh, that's perfect. Sorry, I just got a question popped in my head, and I'm going to ask it. Have you ever considered that place that where you went signified?
Oh, this is great. Let me answer that question and tell me what you think of this answer. And this was actually a somewhat relevant, recent analysis. Okay, let's for a moment, as we look at that, break up my experience into three pieces. First, um, is this. Let's imagine you want to teach someone something. You would ideally create a classroom that is consistent with whatever it is you have to teach, right? You know how it is if we're teaching kindergartners, we put all kinds of colorful cartoon
Right.
pictures up on the walls, like holding a book
Mm-hmm.
or a pencil or doing math or something like that, right? But we construct an environment that is consistent with the message. All right. So for a moment, without answering it, consider that in how the in-between looked.
Okay.
It's obviously going to be a classroom. Now, let's prepare the student for the lesson, right? And in this case, that had to do with me being depersonalized, not aware of being Jim, not aware of having any attachments to this life here and the people here and the activities here, or what kind of car I'm driving, or how much money I'm making, or all the degrees that might follow my name. No. Stripped down from what I call active mind to observer mind. Just observe, no reaction. And then present the lesson to this prepared student in this thematically consistent classroom. And the lesson was remove all choices in your future that would be to your spiritual detriment. And your only guide is pain. Why is that? Imagine if one of those choices were, oh, on this day, when I'm filling up with gasoline, I'll go into the shop and I'll buy a Powerball, a lottery ticket, right? And on that day, I won millions and millions of dollars. Okay. That in and of itself is not bad. But what if I did that and I became the biggest jerk that ever lived? Because I can be that biggest jerk. Not that I'm a jerk type person, but there could be all kinds of other failings that could surface as a result of making that choice and winning that ton of money. And again, it's not like that was one of the choices I threw out, but I'm just as an example that I think a lot of people can relate to. Now, if you had not been depersonalized, if you were fully cognizant of who you were here and your family and all your stuff here, you might really want to argue the point. Please let me win. I promise I won't be a jerk. Or if I am a jerk, I promise I'll just deal with the pain. You know what I'm saying? It becomes a long and drawn out argument. But if you're stripped away to the point that you don't have any desires, money doesn't really mean anything. Whether you're a man or a woman, black or white, Muslim or Christian, blah, 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 blah. All those polarities don't mean anything because you're that singular conscious who has been a woman, who has been a man, who has been rich, who has been poor, who has been everything there is already to be. So the attraction of possibly keeping those choices in my future that might be materially or in the world considered, good to have. If you touch them and they cause you pain, that's the only God you need. So that's the three aspects that kind of bring toward an answer to your question. Because think about it. If you're in a post-apocalyptic city that got blown up by a nuclear bomb, you're standing where a really terrible decision was made.
True. So the reason why I asked that was, well, for one, it popped into my head, but two, you were pulling things out of something and you were throwing them away. So it signified, it almost seemed like a life review, but a life review of an ego.
Well, it's sort of the flip side because
it's so interesting.
Let's go there. But the first part was most life reviews have to do with your past. What I had was what you might call the fruit of having lived a life that you could have reviewed.
Mm.
And that fruit being the choices that remain to me after I've made the choices in the past.
Right.
And was it the death of ego? Possibly, but it may not be for me to say.
It might not be. I was just putting it out there for you to like something to think on because I just listened to it, not saying that you're egotistical, nothing
Mm,
like that,
yeah,
but just taking out what wasn't working. And then, but you also said that you were a very spiritual person, right?
yeah.
And you had gone through a lot prior to that mentally. You were ready for a family, but you were working hard. So that's kind of where that took me for some reason.
No, I think that's an
Um,
excellent question. I've actually wondered, is it possible that the degree of my depersonalization could have been without ego? That is such a big
it may
statement. I
have.
would never make it because they say ego is the last to fall. And I have a feeling I have a
Yeah.
lot further to go before I could say that. That even if you said you're so benign and so kind and so loving, where's the ego? There may still be one iota of individuality there that separates you from
Yeah,
the divine.
that's right.
So it might be expressed as what anyone would recognize as ego, but it still may be wrapped up in your individuality. So,
I think it's always good to explore.
yeah, absolutely.
You don't
That's
have to take it. Like I think I'm the type of person, and people that are watching, you take what resonates and
yeah,
leave the rest. And that's
bingo.
kind of just how I look at it. Um, I get the feeling also that you were not afraid of dying at all.
You know, I mean, I've been in wars. I've been in firefights, and I've in my explorations all over the world. I was always where I could have gotten killed, or died so easily. And it's just one of those things that when you become really focused, when you really focus your attention, you kind of go into that observer mind, and that observer mind is not afraid to die for the body to die. And so I would say that if you're ever worried about dying, you're sitting there panicking, that will kill you. But if you remain focused, that's where you're going to find the solution, or the solution is going to come to you. But you won't be afraid of dying. And again, it's not a macho thing. It's just I was really focused on what was going on so that I could see all the patterns, all the data points I needed to connect that
Hmm.
says, oh, A, B, C, and D, and I'm out.
So, if I asked you if you were walking your purpose before the crash, what would you say?
Yes, because I made it to the crash.
Good one. Hey, I really like that. That's actually a really good point. Now, if I asked you, are you walking your purpose now after the crash?
I believe yes, and more consciously, because
Mm.
one of the things I have become aware of is that, and this I believe is true, but everyone would have to speak up for themselves. But my appraisal of
Mm.
people who have had a spiritually transforming experience, NDE or not, some people can do it just, through the grace of meditation, is that at some point you're chosen. You are removed from the herd. You are drafted like in the military, and you're now going to go where you can do the divine the most good.
That's right.
And it's the resonance in your voice, it's the selflessness of your actions, the spirit of service to humanity around us that sets an example for other people. And you have no, it's hard, you can't imagine the number of people who watch you. So you'll never know the number of people you're helping. But when we are consistent, authentic with our message and with our truth, it has a deep and abiding power to encourage other people to do the same.
I love that. And every single time I wanted to say this, when we first started talking before we were recording, yes, you've been on a few podcasts, but one thing is our energy's never been together. So you're here with me and my energy now. And another thing I wanted to say is that every single time you tell your story, someone it helps someone every single time. Every time they read your book. It only takes one, and every single time you do it, every single time you help someone. And that's got to feel good.
Can I share with you a brief story about that? The
Sure.
very, 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 very first
Sure.
interview I ever did, of course, you listen to it and you want to hear how you sounded and how it went, right? But then I listened to the following week's podcast because I wanted to see, did anybody have any questions, or whatever? And there was one woman who wrote in and said, I listened to Jim's experience last week, and it gave me the strength to make a hard choice in my life.
See?
She was a widow. She'd met a man. The man was providing for her financially because she was struggling now, right? There were two incomes, now there's half the one. But he was taking care of things, but he was married. And so she was terrified of breaking it off, which was, I guess, the right thing to do, because she would be poor. And she said, but Jim's story gave me the strength to make the right choice in that relationship. And I started crying while I was driving. And I just thought, how beautiful. And that's why I say you just never know. You can only imagine, but you can never know all the people you're helping, because everybody's coming at it from a different direction, and they're going to hear what you say through their filters that are meaningful to them. So
that's right.
Yep.
That's exactly the way I feel. I feel that way just about everything in my life. I think that, some people will resonate with me, some won't. It doesn't matter. It's like they'll resonate with that person, they'll resonate with that person more. All I know and care about is that it's getting out there, is that they're resonating with someone, and that it's helping people to come back to themselves and remember who they are. And that's going to take all of us together. I always say this, to build a bridge for everyone, and that includes you, that includes anybody. And I do truly believe that your near-death experience was for a reason. Do you believe that? And have you found your purpose?
Well, it's like it said on the other side. Your being here is an answer to a prayer. You prayed for this. You asked for this. This was a choice. And everybody say, to what degree? I say, probably just any of those times for spiritually oriented people that you could say there was a particular tough time. We call it the soul's midnight or whatever, but it could have been a child, could have been a teenager, could be an adult. But at some point you were saying to God, I'm really not happy being in this place. It'd be nice to awaken to the question of being here rather than just having an answer. It would be nice to feel closer to you, to have that peace of these Buddhist monks on the side of Mount Everest or something. Just like, I know where I want to be, and I ain't here. And so with that sincere prayer, I think your feet start to be oriented home. And so your purpose winds up not so much being a place you're trying to get here as a way you are living. And
I like that.
And as I've said, if you live a prayerful life, you'll never have to pray again. And so it's just a matter of being in flow. If you're in flow, you're living according to your purpose. If you fall out of flow, you need to get back in flow. How's that?
That sounds absolutely beautiful. So my final question to you is, every soul who returns back always brings a truth. What truth did you return with that you would want everyone listening to hold on to?
I would just repeat what was said to me. Pay more attention to your relationships and be gentle with everyone as I am gentle with you. And what's interesting is, it would really be easy to simplistically hear that pay more attention to your relationships to mean don't wait till you're on your deathbed to apologize for being nasty to them. Like you hear, no one's on the deathbed saying, I wish I'd spent more time in the office. They're always saying, I wish I had been kinder to my children, faithful to my wife or husband, whatever, right? Do it now. Don't wait till then, and never part in anger. But it's also saying, be more analytical, critical of the relationship you entertain. Because if you start to orient your ship toward the northern star, if you start to become more spiritual, many are the forces that will try to slow you down. You know,
Oh,
they will, through one way or another, try to enter your sphere of influence, insinuate themselves into your sphere of influence. They may not actively think they're there to slow you down, but what they want out of you would slow you down. It's like
oh,
this.
I love that.
And you know how a lot of us are, if we have a 53% divorce rate, it means a lot of us are lonely, right? And one thing I learned is you can live a spiritual life with a spouse. You can live a spiritual life without a spouse, but you cannot live a spiritual life against a spouse.
That's right.
And you can broaden that to every other relationship as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. Um, Jim, for those who want to go deeper into your experience, can you share any offerings or services or published works that you have and where people can find them, please?
Sure. Um, I would say the easiest would probably go to my website. It's In Between Productions. I know it sounds so commercial, doesn't it? In Between Productions.com. And that has the conversation I had with the In Between. If you go to the media page, really click on and watch the 33-minute movie that we've just released. It's on YouTube, but it's going out to a bunch of film festivals now. It may become the first story in a series. And then my 2 books are there, and you can click on them and go right to Amazon. Like I say, I'm not in the business of selling books, but if you like and you want to try it, I also narrated my audiobook version on Audible
Oh,
because I feel like everyone who writes a book, especially about spiritual stuff, just try and narrate it yourself. I mean, unless you really sound horrible, give it a try because people are going to be attracted to the authenticity of your voice. They're going to be attracted to the authenticity of it not being a perfect Hollywood voice. And they're going to be attracted to the authenticity of your truth that no one can tell better than you. So give it a shot. Okay. And then
I love that.
just market it with some other people and say, what do you think? And if they come back and say, yeah, this could work, do it. And I guarantee you probably won't sell an audiobook because of your voice. Okay. And then, so I had those 2 books. And the first one, like I said, is The In Between a Trip of a Lifetime. But the second one was a fully channeled book. I wrote it in a month. I don't remember writing it. And that's great because
Oh, wow.
at the load of that of ego saying, oh, wrote a book. But it's really interesting. I was actually shown like an out of body experience. I was sort of shown how to write the book. And I didn't understand that until I finished writing the book. And then I looked at it and laughed. I said, I wrote the book according to the blueprint I was shown, but I didn't know. That's the other thing is, I think the more you can let go, title of the book. And, in the Bible where it says, be still and know that I am God, the more correct translation from the Aramaic is let go and know that I'm God. Not be still and know that I'm God, but let go and know that I am God. And I thought that's pretty cool. Because the more we get ourselves out of the way, the more the flow can come through unimpeded and more pure. And that's it. We're like a soup ladle. The soup ladle doesn't know if the soup's hot, cold, bitter, sweet, tastes like crap, tastes good. And it's not the job. It's just, my job's just to deliver soup to whoever needs to eat soup. I don't know anything about the soup, so don't ask me questions. And also,
I love that.
there's a scheduling page too. If anybody wants to, and I hate that this could sound commercial, but I'll explain it if you like. There is a place where you can come with me, and there is a charge, but I don't do that to filter. And if anybody ever wants to have a second phone call, I don't charge for that. And I also don't really watch the clock when I'm trying. So so if you ever want like some one-on-one time, there's a page for that, and you can schedule time. I'll make time for you.
And that's on your website, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And we'll have all that in the description box below.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Thank you so much, Jim. This has been fun. And our conversation before was great too. I should have had the camera rolling. It was absolutely awesome. I'm definitely loving this vibe we have here. But I wanted to thank you, right? It is. Yeah. I wanted to thank you for sharing this powerful story with such honesty, because what you live through is beyond what most of us can probably never imagine. Yet you transformed it into wisdom, and now you help people understand life, death, and purpose in a whole new way. And I am truly grateful you are here and willing to share your experience with us today. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you for the opportunity, MJ. It's really just a matter of scale, isn't it? The process of discovery is
Mm-hmm.
the same, whether it's a child or whether it's an old person or anybody all over the
That's right.
world. And I think that's the thing. Just be true to the process, encourage the process.
I
Don't worry
love
about the
that.
scale. It'll be as it's meant to
I
be.
love. Oh, thank you so much. And to all that are listening or watching, may this story be a gentle reminder that the descent, the fall, the impact, the shattering can become the place where truth finally reaches us. And sometimes you have to hit the ground before you can see the sky again. And until next time, stay open, stay curious, and keep returning to the truth within you.